Favasia is also with me. We're here today to talk to you about an overview of the school admissions process, but also how it specifically relates to your child and the priority in admissions for previously looked after children. Favasia, do you want to just introduce yourself and perhaps say what your involvement is with previously LAC?
Yeah, so I'm an admissions and fair access officer, but I predominantly process applications for children in care. That's new round and the in-year application process. And for the new round, I deal with all the checks that are involved with applications made by parents, carers, for children who have been adopted or left care via SGO or child arrangement order. So I do those checks and I liaise with parents just to make sure that everything's in check.
Thank you. Is George going to put the slides up? Thank you.
Yes, do you want them now?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, yeah. We anticipate an hour maximum. We're certainly not planning to go until 6. It might be less time. I've got various slides to talk through, and then, as Ellie said, we'll take questions at the end. You can pop them in the chat, or at the end, if you want to ask them verbally, that's fine. Thank you. Could we have the next slide, please, George? So what we're going to cover this afternoon for you, someone's just asked, will we send the slides? Yes, Virtual School will send them out to you afterwards. Yeah, definitely, and presumably the recording as well. Does everybody know? Yeah, this is being recorded, so just so that you're aware. So what we're going to cover today, first of all, definition of a legal school admissions definition of PLAC and IA PLAC, explain what that is. Education, health and care plans. Priority in admissions for previously LAC and IA PLAC. New round admissions, what that is and how you go about applying. Delaying starting school for your child, children out of their normal year group. We'll touch on in-year admissions, and then, as we said at the end, there'll be a chance for any questions so that you feel you know what the process is and you feel you've got everything that you can out of this briefing. Okay, next slide, please, George. But you'll get the slides. You'll be able to look at them properly afterwards. So, from a school admissions point of view, the legal definition, just wanted to talk these through with you, of previously looked after children is children who've been in the care of a local authority under the Children Act 1989 and who left that care through one of 3 routes, as you'll know: adoption, child arrangement order or special guardianship order, SGO. We also now have internationally adopted previously looked after children, IA PLAC. I'm going to read this out, this definition, because this is new. Children who appear to the admission authority for the school to have been in state care outside England and ceased to be in state care as a result of being adopted. A child will be regarded as having been in state care outside England if they were accommodated by a public authority, a religious organisation, or any other provider of care whose sole or main purpose is to benefit society. So you can see that's quite a wide spectrum. The parent or carer will need to provide evidence to demonstrate that the child was in state care outside England and left that care as a result of being adopted. So that covers all manner of circumstances. It could be children who were in an orphanage, in a charitable organisation, anything that means they've been adopted from abroad. But for the definition of previously looked after children, this is, if you like, a subset of that. Internationally adopted also comes under PLAC. Okay, next slide, please, George. Education, health and care plans. These are children who have the highest level of SEND, special educational needs and disability. So if they have an EHCP, it will be a formal legal document that you'll have, and that will name the school that they need to be educated at. I've put this slide in early because if your child has an EHCP, there's a different route to apply for a school place. Instead of coming through my team, the school admissions team, you will apply through the SEND admissions team. It's slightly different. I've put a link in there. When you get the slides, they're live hyperlinks. So if your child does have an EHCP, some of what I'll go on to say in the other slides won't be relevant. Some of it will be, but there is a different process if your child has an EHCP. I just want you to be aware. Okay, next slide, please, George.
Can you see it?
Can now, thank you. So this is important for you guys. Priority in admissions for previously LAC and the internationally adopted PLAC. So in school admissions law, the highest priority for school places must be given to LAC, looked after children, and to previously looked after children. So the government recognises that these children have been disadvantaged, and it wants to ensure that they are given top priority for a school place. And from this September, we have this subset, if you like, of the internationally adopted PLAC that come under PLAC. Now there is a slight but, there's often a but, that applies for faith schools. And admissions law says they must give highest priority to LAC and PLAC of that faith. That still stands. But then they're allowed to give priority to non-LAC and PLAC of that faith before LAC and PLAC not of the faith. And in Surrey, quite a number of our Catholic schools do that. They are allowed to, it's entirely lawful, but you just need to be aware. The Church of England schools don't. But if you are not Catholic, but you want to apply to a Catholic school for your child, be aware they will have a lower priority. They will come after all other Catholic children. Okay, so just want you to be aware of that. I've put a link there to the law that I'm talking about, the Department for Education DfE School Admissions Code. So if you want to check back on what I've said, that is in there. Okay, next slide, please, George. So coming on to new round admissions. New round means year R, also known as reception or foundation, year 7 secondary, and year 3 for a junior or a primary that has a further intake at year 3. So this is your September start for children starting school, children going to secondary or going to junior. That's what we call new round. So for year R, children starting school, you need to apply in the school year that your child turns 4. So for entry next September, September 2022, for year R, your child will normally have been born between the 1st of September 2017 and the 31st of August 2018. Now I put some key dates in there. I don't know if anyone here has a child in year 6. If you do, you hopefully know that you need to be applying now for year 7 place, because the national closing date is the 31st of October, a couple of weeks' time. But for year R and for year 3 for next September, we start the application process on the 1st of November, so that's just after half term. And the national closing date is the 15th of January in the new year. Please keep that date in mind. We urge you to get your application in before the closing date if your child's due to start school from next September. Okay, 15th of January. We highly recommend that you apply online. We have an online process. It's easy, it's straightforward. You can apply from a smartphone. The functionality has been greatly improved in recent years. You don't necessarily have to have a laptop or a tablet. You can apply from your phone. You can save your application as you go along, so you don't have to do it all in one go. You can make changes to it before the closing date. And it means that once you've applied, you'll get an email back, and that will set out everything you've put in your application and the schools that you've named. So if you've got any queries, you can see straight away what we've got in our system. If you don't get an email, that means you've not hit submit. We do get parents who go all the way through and put everything in and don't hit that final button that says submit. So make sure you do that and you'll get an email back. In terms of email addresses, please make sure you use an address that you check regularly, because from time to time we might need to send you notifications, or if we've got any queries, we might be sending you messages. And if you don't look at that email address regularly, you might miss something really important. You'll get your offer if you apply online by email on the 19th of April next year, which is also, that makes it easy. You don't have to wait for a letter in the post, and you can accept the place online, and that's all very straightforward. But yeah, just make sure, just keep an eye on your junk mail as well, because sometimes our emails get junked. We don't recommend using a work email address, because sometimes people change jobs and forget to tell us that they need to change the email address. Just make sure it's a current address that you check. And I've put some links in the slides there about our new round information for applying. Okay, So you've got quite a long window. If you're applying for next September, the application process opens 1st of November, closing date 15th of January. So you've got a good chunk of time to have a good think about it and decide which schools you think are most appropriate for your child. You know your child and what you think would be a good fit. So before you actually apply, we strongly recommend that you do your homework, as it were. Have a look at what all the information on our web pages. There is a lot up there, we appreciate that, but we want to give parents a full picture. We want to make sure that you can make a really informed decision. So there's lots of information to read. Have a look at school websites. They're really useful. There's lots of information, there's photos, there's reports, there's sometimes things that children have created. So you start to get a flavour of what the school looks like and what it feels like. You can look at the school's Ofsted report, which is Ofsted is the National Inspectorate of Schools. So every school will have a report on Ofsted's website, public report of whenever they were last visited, and it will say what the school standard is. Visit the schools if you can. Last year with COVID, that was impossible, but this year school visits are happening again. Sometimes schools have a set day or set days when they want people to come in. Other times they say ring up and book a tour at a convenient time. But it's a really good way to look around a school, see what it looks like in the daytime when the pupils are there, and again get a feel for how would that suit my child. You know, how does that seem? Looking at a website is great, but actually on the ground is the best way. Last year, what a lot of schools did was create a virtual tour because they couldn't have anyone coming in. They filmed, you know, shots of the school and somebody talking about it. So if you can't go in, that might be another a mechanism to at least have a look and see what the school looks like. We have a function on our website called Surrey School Map, where you can find out your nearest schools. You put in your postcode and your child's age and your address, and then it asks you how many schools do you want to know and how far out in miles, and it will tell you all the local schools. So if you're not very familiar with what you have around you, that's definitely worth having a look, and then you can see, and as part of your research you can find out about them. Have a look at how many places each school will offer next September. So this is called the PAN, the Published Admission Number, and what the school's admission criteria are. So that each school must publish how places will be offered, what is the priority. So Lac and Plaque should be first, with a slight exception of those Catholic schools, but you'll see set out. And you can see by how many places, you'll get a sense of how big the school is. Some schools will just admit 30 children, one class. Some will admit 2 classes or 3 classes, 60 or 90 children. So again, that will just give you an idea of the size of the school and whether that's suitable for your child. Have a think as well about whether your child might be eligible for home to school transport if your schools are some distance away. If you're applying for Year R or Year 3, you'll need to apply for transport after you've had your school offer. For Year 7, the child is automatically assessed. The Homes to School transport policy is on our website and explains who is eligible. As a very general principle, the government sets out distances that children are expected to be able to walk to school, which is 2 miles for the under 8s, and then it rises to 3 miles for children who are 8 and above. And generally the expectation is your child will attend the nearest school. So if you want your child to go to a school 5 miles away, but there's a school on the doorstep, you wouldn't normally get transport because the expectation would be they'd go to their local school. And just be aware that if your child is entitled to transport, it's not normally available to the term after they're 5. That's what local authorities are obliged to provide. So the term after they're 5, if your child starts school early, which they can, and they're entitled, ordinarily they wouldn't be given transport till that point. Next slide, please, George. Okay, so coming on specifically to your circumstances and your children. So to apply for priority for previously looked after children, you must indicate that on the application. So you'll need to tick that box, and you also need to send us in evidence to validate that. We do get parents who occasionally tick it in error. We want to be certain that only children who are genuinely previously looked after are given that priority. So it's not that we're not trusting what you're saying, we just have to be honest and fair to everybody and have that evidence that we can say, yes, definitely that child needs that priority. So the kind of suitable evidence that you'll need to send us with your application includes a copy of the adoption order or the adoption certificate that will show the local authority that the child is in care to, copy of the child arrangement order, or a copy of the SGO, the special guardianship order. And those latter two, so the child arrangement order and the SGO, we also need proof that the child is in the care of a local authority in England or Wales, because it's not explicit in the way it is on the adoption order. That could be a letter from the local authority. It doesn't necessarily have to be from your social worker from the local authority, something official from that local authority that confirms the child was in care to them and the date that they left care. And that will be sufficient. The internationally adopted previously lack, that evidence is obviously going to vary. It will depend on which country the child's come from, how they're in care there. So we can't be really prescriptive, but if that applies to you, then send us whatever you have. And if we've got any queries, we would obviously come back to you. Next slide, please, George. So you should send us this evidence of your child's previously looked after status by the national closing date. So make your application and send that evidence at the same time. So if you're applying for year 7, it's 31st of October, soon. For year R, for year 3, 15th of January. And we ask that you scan or photograph the evidence, all pages, make sure it's clear, it's not blurred, or sometimes we get wonky evidence where the page has slipped a bit, but make sure that it's all very clear. And if you're applying online, you can upload it at the same time. It's a very easy way to do that, and we want to reassure you it's a very secure way to send that to us. Our online admissions system is used by local authorities right across London and bordering London, thousands of parents. It's very secure, very tested. Obviously, documents about your children are confidential. They're very precious to you, but please be reassured if you upload it with your application, it is safe, it is secure. It's really the best way to do that. And it means that it's instantly attached to your application. If you send it separately, we have to match it up with the application, and it's just an extra task for us. But if you send it at the same time, then that's really helpful. If you send it to us by email, that's less secure. Obviously, it depends on your internet provider. It won't be as safe as sending it with your online application, but if you do need to, I've put our email address there. We don't recommend that you post evidence to us because obviously that's the least secure means, but if you really need to, I've put our postal address. Please send it by recorded delivery, because we do every year get parents who say they've sent us things and they just don't arrive. It doesn't need to be guaranteed next day delivery, but if you send it recorded, then you can track that it has arrived and you know we'll have got it. If you need to do it that way. For Vasia, did you want to add anything about evidence, about what to send or any things to look out for?
No, I think you've covered everything, Janet. Yes, obviously we do get parents making the application and then they don't attach the evidence, and then I have to email them, prompt them. So if they can send it, upload it at the same time. I know some parents do have some technical difficulties. I mean, sending it by email is fine, but then within that email, you'll have to make sure you put the application reference number, perhaps the child's initials, and that way it'll be easier for us to match it.
Yes, because otherwise it's not immediately obvious who it's for. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please, George. Okay, so delaying your child's start to school. So your child can start school at the beginning of the school year, so September, after their 4th birthday. So in this country, that's when they are entitled to start. The law says that they must be in full-time education by the start of the school term after their 5th birthday. So if your child is an autumn-born child, they'll have to be in school full-time from the January after their birthday, for example. Now that said, for summer-born children, you can't defer entry, you can't delay them starting beyond the beginning of the final term, the summer term, in the year we offer you a place. If you have a summer-born child, they'll have to start April, after Easter. We won't hold a school place for the whole of that school year. So if your child was born between 1st of April and 31st of August 2018, they must take up their school place by April 2023. I know that sounds a long way away, but it will come round. So autumn-borns will have to start in January, spring-borns must start in April, the latest, but also summer-borns need to start in April. We're not going to hold the school place right through that summer term. And when your child starts school, you've got some options. They can start full-time, they can start part-time, or you can defer entry, so you can delay them starting until they reach the legal age they have to be in school. But with that caveat that the summer-borns will have to start at Easter. If you want to do that, so if you want to either defer or if you want them to start part-time, please do still apply by the deadline, the 15th of January. Don't delay, don't hold off, put that application in. And then once they've been offered a school place in April, then you can talk to the head teacher and come to an agreement about what you'd like your child to do. If you do want part-time, and you have that right, just be aware, obviously schools have to staff accordingly. And if one parent wants their child to have every Monday and Friday off and somebody else wants every afternoon off and somebody else wants Tuesdays and Wednesdays off, they can't promise that they can meet that kind of arrangement. They might say for part-time we offer this, but that's a conversation for you to have with that head teacher once you've got a place. But part-time as a general principle, you can do that. That's a right that you have until your child must be full-time. Okay, next slide, please, George. Children out of their normal age group. So if you want your child to be educated out of their normal age group, either up a year or down a year, the admission authority for the school that you're applying to, or each school you apply to, will consider your request based on the child's circumstances and what's in your child's best interests. Okay. Now for autumn and spring-borns, as I said, they have to be in school the term after they are 5. So in terms of starting in year R, these requests would only apply to summer-borns. Okay, autumn-borns couldn't go out of year because they have to be in school January of the year that they're 5, the term after they're 5. But for summer-borns, there are parents who feel actually I'd like my child to start the following September. So what you need to do when you're applying, apply at the normal time, apply by the 15th of January, but then also with your application, explain that you want that to be considered. And if you want to, send us evidence around that. We can't insist on the evidence, but obviously it will strengthen your request if you put something in. It might be, for example, your child has delayed development, they might have significant medical needs that would perhaps lend themselves to being with a younger cohort. We have some children, for example, who've been born prematurely in August when actually they were due in September the following school year, that sort of thing. If you want to talk to us about it, I've put our phone number in there, but it's something to consider if you have a summer-born. We're not recommending it, we're not saying yes, of course, but if you put in a request, then the schools have a duty to consider that, and the local authorities involved as well. And there's plenty of information about that on the website. I've put a link there for you. The only exception, if your child has an EHCP, an Education, Health and Care Plan, even if they're autumn or spring-born, that can sometimes recommend that or name that they will be out of year. But for children without an EHCP, if we're talking about starting school, it would only be for summer-borns. In-year admissions. So we've talked about new round, so children starting school, going to year 3 or going to year 7 in September. In year is basically everything else. So for those year groups, year R, year 3 or year 7, it's once the year started, September onwards, we've had all the applications. Once those children have started, that then turns into an in-year application. For any other year group, it's any time of the year. That's what we call in-year. And the priority for LAC and PLAC applies in the same way. Okay, so your child would still have priority whether it's a new round application or you're seeking a place in year. I should have said actually in year admissions, it's generally children who've moved. I mean, we don't encourage children to move schools unnecessarily, so it tends to be people who've moved into Surrey or moved within Surrey and obviously need a local school to their new address. And if you're applying for in-year, then just the same as new round, you'll need to supply evidence of your child's previously looked after status. So the same type of evidence, you'll need to put that forward for your child to be given that priority. For in-year, for some schools, you apply via our team, the school admissions team. For other schools, you would apply direct to the school. And on our web pages, we have information about that. And there's a list of schools telling you for each school how to apply. It is a bit of a mixed economy. OK, next slide, please, George. I think we're almost at the end. Yes. I've given again link to our web pages. I know I said it a few times, but there's a lot of information there. You've got plenty of time. If you're applying for next September for Year R, Year 3, you've got lots of time to go away and do some reading, see what's out there, do your research. We've got a phone number that you can call. And I've just put as another reminder what those closing dates are. So secondary is coming up soon, 31st of October. And then reception Year R, Year 3 is 15th of January. Do try to make sure you get it in on time. We do get late applications, and we consider when we get late applications whether they could have been made on time or not. Some are agreed as on time because the family circumstances are such that they couldn't reasonably have applied, but where it's a parent who just forgot, didn't get around to it, would be less likely to agree that as on time. So keep that date in mind. You'll probably hear things on the radio. We put out adverts near the time to remind parents. We leaflet a lot of places. So yeah, if you're on social media, some words go out there. So hopefully you'll see those reminders. But yeah, keep that date uppermost in your mind and get your application in. Right, that's all that we want to say. It's really over to you now. Is any questions, anything you think's not clear, or anything you want to ask? Is there anything in the chat, Ellie? I haven't had a chance to look.
No, I don't think there's anything in the chat at the moment. Can I verbally ask a question? Is that all right?
Yes, of course. What was your name?
Sorry. I'm Kirsty.
Kirsty.
So yeah, thank you so much for that. It's really, really helpful. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll wait to keep everyone's time. But just on that whole bit around the children, so applying outside of that normal age group. So you're saying that put in the, when you're applying, say that you're looking for that as well. Does that affect whether or not? So let's say we put the application in and do that, but actually come April when it's all just, getting approved, we decide actually we don't want to move him out of the normal age group. Does it affect any of their ability to secure a place for that year?
Well, that's why we would always say apply at the normal time.
Yeah, okay.
So secure a place for your child with the other 4-year-olds rising 5s.
Yeah.
And then you've got a place. And then, I mean, obviously they'd need to be summer born to be going out of year to start anyway. Yeah, if you decide afterwards, actually, I want to ask my child to go out of year, then you have a guaranteed place to fall back on. Okay. In case that request isn't agreed.
Okay.
So apply at the normal time. Yeah. But if that's something you're interested in, then raise it at the time of your application. That's the best way to do it.
Okay. And thank you. And on the EHCP, so what if you put your application in and then your child, so at the point of the application they don't have an EHCP, but then they do, and they either get that before the official closing date, or if it's after, what happens in that?
Yeah, that does happen all the time, to be honest. If your child doesn't yet have one, do apply through us. If they then are given an EHCP, the SEND team will take over the application. The EHCP will name the school, and they will liaise with us to say this child will be going to this school. So there is a lot of, in an ideal world, all the EHCPs would be agreed before the closing date, but it doesn't always work that way. So as long as they don't have an EHCP, even if they're going through the process, if it's not yet been agreed, apply to us as normal before the 15th of January.
Okay.
Yeah, and then if it's subsequently an EHCP is granted for your child, then you'll be transferred over to the SEND team. You won't be forgotten, you won't be left hanging, but you'll then become their responsibility.
Okay. And would that affect the school that you've applied for then, potentially, if the EHCP names the school that they should attend?
Well, the parent has to be consulted on what school should be named in the EHCP.
Okay.
It's not done unto you. You have the right to state a preference in the same way as you do on a school application. The school has a legal right to appeal against that if they felt they couldn't meet the child's needs, but generally the school that is named on an EHCP is the school they'll be going to.
Okay.
So if at that point, if an EHCP is agreed, your child would come out of our system, if you like.
Okay.
Place would be reserved for the child through the SEND team at the school. Does that answer you?
Yeah, definitely.
It is complex, and yeah, sometimes timescales don't quite align between our team and SEND. But the important thing is that children aren't forgotten, that they're in the system, and there's an application there. It's easier to cancel one than to make one late.
Yeah, okay. And there's nothing in that scenario we need to do other than make sure we apply on time, for what we want. It would all be triggered through the EHCP process.
Yeah, if they don't have one before the closing date, then put in a normal application to us. And you can name up to 4 schools. I should have said that actually. Secondary, we allow up to 6 preference schools, and primary up to 4. So you can do that. And yeah, if it's converted to an EHCP, then your child will be going to a school that's named on that.
Yeah.
Plan.
Okay. I'll ask another question while I'm here. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. We want to have
so you mentioned then, so just thinking about then going back to, so taking the child out of their normal year group. So if they're summer born, putting them to the next year. And you said put the application in as normal, obviously say what you want to do. Do you need, I've heard lots of different things from different groups that I've been part of around whether or not you should talk to the school ahead of putting the application in and getting their agreement beforehand. Like
we do recommend that, because then it means that you've had an open conversation. You're not obliged to. But it helps the school, especially if they've spoken to you, they might even have met you and your child. It just gives them a fuller picture, really, to make their decision. That there's no obligation. Some parents don't want to, but we do generally recommend it, because it just keeps things very much in the open.
Yeah. Okay.
It depends on the type of school it is. If it's an academy school where the head teacher makes that decision. So yeah, if it is an academy or a primary 4 and you're wanting out of year group, in most of those cases it is the head teacher that makes that decision, and we.
Oh, okay.
If it's a local authority maintained school or a school that gives us the permission to make that decision on their behalf, then so yeah, it's always good to have that dialogue with the school so they're aware.
Oh, okay. I didn't realise that then. So if they're academies, they make the decision, not the local authority.
Yes.
The admissions authority. Okay.
In some cases, they do sort of ask us to make that decision. Janet, do they have a buyback service where they can ask us to consider those cases? I think.
Yeah, some schools devolve that power to us, if you like, but we would always consult the head teacher. We would seek their views. Ultimately, decision would be ours for schools that we maintain. But sometimes if you submit paperwork, it can be quite dry, can't it? Paperwork about anybody. Whereas if you have a conversation with the school, it brings the child more to life, whether or not they actually meet the child, and it just means they have a bit more of a picture. They can ask questions, and especially if, for example, if your child's not in an early years setting, if they're not in a nursery at the moment, it means the school can perhaps ask a bit more about what are they doing, where are they at developmentally, that kind of thing, that perhaps the professional isn't there to see them doing.
Okay.
Our role is more administrative, whereas school, it's about the education of the child. So the school would be really the best, the head teacher, they're specialists, what they do, so they are the best people to make and look at those cases and make those decisions.
Schools they're very used to accommodating summer-borns, very young children. Obviously they do that all the time, and there isn't a general expectation that those children will go back down a year. There's a right to request it. But the question that everyone should ask is it in the child's best interest? That's ultimately the test, if you like. Is that the right thing for the child? And And obviously, if you believe that is the right thing for your child, then you'll put that case forward.
And it's long term. It's going to be at every stage. So when it comes to secondary school places, again, they're going so.
Yeah, there's no. We should say there's no guarantee your child stays out of year. So when you get to, as Fawaz says, applying for secondary, then again you'll have to put in that request for them to remain out of year. So it's just something to bear in mind, really.
Yeah. So at each, okay. So if they had to go to junior as well, if they'd gone, okay. Oh, big decisions, eh?
Yes, but time to think it through, and you can call us, and it's not anything that anyone has to decide today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go on mute and let everyone else ask their questions.
No problem. Thanks, Kirsty. Ellie, I think something just flashed up, didn't it? A couple of questions. Lisa's asking if you're a year 6. Did you want to speak, Lisa, or do you want me to read out your question? I don't want to presume.
I don't mind speaking.
Okay, go on then.
Yeah, no, I just want to clarify, only from visiting various specialist schools and overhearing parents talking, I just wanted to clarify that obviously the application's being dealt by my same caseworker. I don't need to do an online application, is that correct? It's all been held by the case officer and he will do all of that. Like he's doing, I don't need to do what the other parents need to do, is that correct?
It's not the same online process, no. I don't know all the details. I don't know if you know, for Fawaz, there's a different closing date, I think, isn't there, for the parents to submit their preference. Do you know what the date is?
No, I don't. I mean, does your child, they definitely have an EHCP? They're not going through the process of getting one?
No, he's had one since he was in reception. So,
yeah.
So then you don't need to follow the main, it's only for the mainstream applications where the child is not going through an EHCP or has one, that they need to make the application by that 31st of October deadline. That doesn't apply to your case officer. Will be managing that. I'm not sure what the time frames are. I'm afraid that's something you'd need to check with them.
I was going to say, talk to the case officer, because they will need to consult you about which school you think is appropriate for secondary for your child. But in terms of timescales, I'm not certain. But yeah, liaise with them, and they should be able to advise you on that.
Oh, brilliant. That is exactly what I thought. It's just that I overheard a lot of parents thinking that they still needed to apply online, and I just wanted to make sure I wasn't. Yeah,
not for children with an EHCP. No, we're talking about the mainstream children.
We do every year. We do get applications every year by parents. They submit a mainstream application, but their child is an EHCP, and we pick that up normally, and then we would consult with the SEND admissions team, and then we would actually have to withdraw that application on our system, because you're already in the system, but with another team. So yeah.
The other question is obviously if it had been the regular application, he is a LAC child, previously looked after a child. We have an SGO. Is it still the same system? As in, does he not get priority and an EHCP because of him being a LAC, us having an SGO? And
EHCP is priority anyway. It's the same.
There's there isn't any higher priority, because children with an EHCP must go to the school that is named on the EHCP. They effectively go above everybody. I mean, strictly speaking, they go above the LAC and PLAC children. Really, they are placed first. Those places are reserved for them before every other.
Okay.
So you don't need to worry.
No, that's cool. And I was thinking, do I need to provide the documentation and things like that? Because I haven't been asked by the same caseworker, but I just check.
No, I mean, you'd obviously want to make the new school aware of his previously LAC status, of course, in terms of the care for your child, but in terms of the application and a school being named for secondary, no, they wouldn't need to see that. That wouldn't have any bearing, because your child will go to the school that's named on the plan anyway.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for preparing all of this for us. Appreciated.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, see, when you sent the slides, you'll be able to look at them A, on a bigger screen, and B, everybody in your own time. I know it's quite a lot to take in.
Yeah. you.
Was there anything else you wanted to ask, Lisa?
I think that's about it, really. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so Esther, did you want to ask your question, or did you want me to read it out?
Yeah, so our child is going to be out of year already, and the nursery is currently getting them an EHCP. Yeah. Will I still each year have to prove that they need to be out of year, or will that EHCP follow them their whole lives? And
yeah, it will. It will recommend, it will name that the child should be out of year. There isn't quite the same obligation to make that request each time your child moves to a different school. Did you say your child is going through the process, so they don't yet have an EHCP?
No, they're completing it now. So
okay, so bear in mind with that closing date, if your child doesn't have one before the 15th of January, do put in an application to us in the normal way, and you can always withdraw that if the EHCP comes through later. Okay, depending on where send get to, if it's not issued before that date, please do put in an application to us, then at least you're in the system, and it can be cancelled if needs be. It's better that than you're not in the system at all.
And once he has that, when he has to go to secondary, I mean that caseworker for that will then, resolve that out of year issue. I won't have additional problems.
No, you shouldn't do. I mean, there's an annual review of the plan, and I think in year 5 the intention is that those discussions start happening ahead of time as to what is appropriate, but the expectation would be, I'm sure, that your child would stay out of year.
That's brilliant.
But that would be something to take up with a case officer, but I wouldn't imagine that a child would be expected to, a child with an EHCP would be expected to skip a whole year and catch back up again.
That's great, thanks.
Okay. Are there any other questions? There's nothing else in the chat. Does anybody want to ask anything else? Vazia, was there anything you wanted to add? Do you think was...
The only thing I was going to add, going back to the in-year application process, so that's say if you move within Surrey, or if someone were to move in Surrey, it's not a, there's no e-admissions online application portal like we do have for the new round. So you would have to actually, you can complete an application online, but it would have to be then sort of sent in an email, and then any evidence would have to be sent with that. So it's a slightly different system, and we are working on a parent portal system at the moment. But yes, if you do need to make an in-year admission at some point, it's a slightly different format. It's not the e-admissions website that you would use to make that application. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, e-admissions is great for new round. It's very user friendly, and so you'll have everything there, and it's very quick. You'll get your offer online and all of that. But yes, it doesn't extend to in year, as Vazia says. I can see Esther's typing, so we'll just give her a moment. Or if you want to ask your question, Esther, it's up to you.
No, I'm fine. I was just making notes, and I don't think Teams is smart enough to appreciate.
Oh, okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. Any other questions? Anything anybody wanted to ask? No? Okay. Hopefully we haven't scared you away or anything. I know there's a lot to take in, but as I say, read at your leisure on the website and think about the schools. And, I've got children. It's quite exciting thinking about what's my child like and where could they go, what's going to be appropriate. And you do have that priority with your child being previously looked after. So, quite rightly, you've got that priority. So, yeah, make good use of it, really.
Visit the schools, please do visit. You can now this year, it's allowed. So that's...
Yeah, reputations hang around a long time for schools. A school can lose its reputation quite quickly, and then it takes years to get it back again. Even if Ofsted has given them a good outcome, the local reputation hangs around. But actually, what one parent thinks might be completely different from what you think. Some
schools are more experienced with dealing with previously looked after children. They all get funding, of course, when when they admit a pupil, but some just have better experience than others. So
that's a good point. I mean, that might be something you want to ask if you visit a school. You know, how do you accommodate lack and PLAT children? You know, what's your policy? What support do you provide for them? How do you spend the additional funding for them? I mean, they must publish that on the website, but you might want to ask that question so that you get a sense of, you know, how would they support your child? That's important. Anything else? No,
that's been really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I know not everyone's here at the beginning, but Ellie, you're going to send the slides out, aren't you, over the next few days?
yeah, yeah.
So everybody can see those. And our contact details at the end. So if you've got queries, then do get in touch. Obviously, we want to help parents and guide you through it. So thank you.
Super. Thanks very much. Bye, everyone.